Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for September 18th. Call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is I would ask that you please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner George?
Here.
Commissioner Simmons?
Here.
Commissioner Jarvis?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Thank you. Let the record show all commissioners are present. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. I have one amendment on regular agenda item 9. Right below that will be item 9A, and that is a statement with regard to the interviews regarding the city administrator that took place today in executive session. So that will be a 9A right after number 9. Commissioners?
Make motion to approve.
Thank you,
with the amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. We have a motion to approve as amended. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. We moved and seconded to approve the order of agenda as amended, adding item number 9A. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of September 5th, and we also have approval of minutes of September 5th. We can take these separately or together, whatever is your pleasure.
Make a motion to approve both September 5th and September 11th.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as distributed and in the packet for September 5th and September 11th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item G is the building permits. This is an informational document. It's in your packets. If you have any questions or concerns?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permit report as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving on to the consent agenda. We have items A through F.
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through F as distributed and in the packet. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on, we are now on their regular agenda. First order of business is public comment. Madam Secretary, have we had anybody sign up for public comment?
I do, but he also signed up for the budget item.
Okay. So public comment is for anything that you'd like to visit with about the city. With regard to budget items, as the notice on the door said, we're going to ask you to be specific when we get into that about line items, the parts of the budget that you don't like, so we can address those as necessary. So who signed up for the public comment?
Matt Kidd?
Would you like to speak to, please, sir, please join us. Yes, sir. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. First time I've made comments at a public meeting, so I hope I keep everything inappropriate and how it's supposed to have been done. One, I guess my moving here has been a great area for the medical care that we can receive while retired. It's a fantastic place for protection for the police. Feel very safe in our area. And particularly, I'm really happy with the bison. Although we had the Raiders before, Bison has been a great team, so we're happy to be here. I'd like to maybe just express some of my concern, but I certainly want to make sure it doesn't seem as criticism of this board. I think it's very difficult to be on the boards. My wife was on the city council before in the other city we lived in, and she said trying to balance everybody's expectations and needs was a constant struggle and very difficult. So again, this is just my concern, not to be in any way interpreted as a criticism. Well, we received our tax bill, and basically we're expecting about 10% property tax increases. So a lot of us who are here are now in retirement, and most of the rating agencies indicate this year for Social Security we'll be getting maybe about 3% as a cost of living adjustment. So 10% is certainly a considerable amount compared to what we're going to be increasing our own income by. And just as an additional factor, now they've taken property taxes away as a deductible expense, we actually have to make probably $5,000 to pay a $4,000 tax bill since it's taxed by the federal government and the state. I think also a few employees in Fargo have got incomes that basically increased this year by 12 or 13%. So again, it's quite a bit more than most people, employees or employers or people in retirement, are having increased in their own income. One of the things too, maybe just as a voluntarily consider, and that's basically my thing tonight, is CPI, cost of living increases, maybe to voluntarily consider that as a speed limit when you do increase the amount of the taxes on us, as kind of an indication of really what the citizen can adequately afford. And I think it also gives some cover to the council if you kind of go up by the CPI. So I would just ask you to consider some of again, a lot of people at the table, lots of different needs at the table. I understand that. And I guess I'm kind of representing some of the taxpayers. We'd like to also be considered at the table and just consider some of our needs. It's difficult for everybody. I appreciate everybody's time. I love being in West Fargo. Great community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to West Fargo.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. This closes the public comment portion of our regular scheduled meetings. Item number 2 is now the 2024 West Fargo City Budget Hearing.
2024.
What?
24.
Didn't I say 2024?
Was it 22?
Okay, 2024, pardon me. Commissioners, do you have any comments before we begin? Okay, very good. We're going to close the regular agenda at this time, and we're going to move into the public comment. We have the following, I'm going to go right down the list as people registered, so there's no preference of who we're selecting. The first person we'd like to call to the podium is Rory Jorgensen. Please state your name and address.
Lay down the ground rules.
Rory
So-
Jorgens, oops.
What we're going to ask everyone that's in attendance this evening is we're going to ask everyone to speak to a specific line item if you can. If there's a budget item that you can, that gives us opportunity to go get to the budget and understand what you're talking to. If we talk about the budget as a whole, that's a whole different animal. We'd ask that you try and keep your first comments to 3 minutes. You will be able to rotate through if you have another number of things that you want to talk to, but 3 minutes on the first item that you speak of. Please, your name and address again.
Rory Jorgensen, 1239 Fifth Street Northwest, West Fargo. I guess I was a little bit confused on the actual item or the budget items. I had a brief text with Mark earlier. I just wondered where to turn to for the price of my property going up 36% in a year. This is really gray in the letter you guys send out, and I'll read it verbatim. Citizens will have an opportunity to present an oral or written comments regarding the district's budget added before the hearing. This is what it lists as the hearing. Skip the line about budget being available. Although property valuation information is included in this notice, property values cannot be addressed at the public hearing. Where does the citizen go to?
We'll call on Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. So what that notice means is that in the spring, there's a valuation process that the city goes through in conjunction with the county. And so as a taxpayer, the city assessor will do an appraisal of the property. It goes to the city commission to make a recommendation. Then that goes to the county commission and ultimately the State Board of Equalization. In North Dakota, the valuation of property is separated from the budget process. And so that's why the notice says that. This is the budgeting process, not necessarily the valuation.
Yes, my recommendation is to include that in this statement, so I'm not taking these people's time. And on the other hand, my wife's a city employee, she got a 4% cost of living raise. Why did my house go up 36%?
That's a appraisal issue. I fully understand your concerns. The notice is specified by state law, and so a lot of what the notice looks like has been set forth by state law. And so that's why it includes the terminology it does. The state is very strict on what they tell us we can and can't do with notices.
It appears it should be changed.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep. Will I be notified of the meetings?
You should be, but if, as with anything, if you're interested in knowing when the valuation meeting is, it's something you can sign up with the city to get notification of that specific.
We'll make a point that you're notified, Mr. Jorgensen.
Thank you, gentlemen, ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is John Hanson. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen and madam. I'm an idiot. I'm a first-time home buyer at 60 in West Fargo. So I got this and about fell over. The line item, of course, that is concerning to me, that is almost half of my property taxes for the statement, if this goes through, is the school thing. I've done my bit for King and Country when it comes to that. And so I think I'm just trying to figure out what happens to us when we get to this point in our life where we don't have that. I get the parks, because we use the parks too. We still walk in them. I love the parks. I'm at 5826 Ellis Drive. So that Dakota Park over there is awesome. The kids are always over there playing, and I thank God they are. And I'm on the pond, so I have a lake home, and I don't have to have two homes, so I'm fabulously happy. But that number, and I know we have growing everything everywhere on the planet, is a large number compared to the amount that it would be, I think, if we had the kids, I would say, okay, great. But when we're on these limited incomes, some of us that are in this boat, that's a large number. And we've already paid our bit for King and Country, so I don't know how you amortize that a different way for the people that are a certain age and not. And I get the conflict there. But if this goes through, this is, a good whack in the butt, just FYI. So, and that's about all I've got to add to that. Just take that into consideration. I don't know if we can ever change that process, but I'm here. I wanted to meet you all, and I wanted to participate a little bit and let you see my face, because hopefully you won't see it that often.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Steve Marquardt.
Good evening. Steve Marquardt, 725 15th Avenue East. I've been there several times, and back to the idea is the same thing. I am going to look at the budget. I took some time and looked at some things that were there. And I do have several points I'd like to look at. And of course, I got my 3 minutes. I'll put myself on the clock right now. As the budget is, there's several different things on there. One is the travel and education expense is proposed to increase 10%. Okay? I'd like to know why that's happening, and why we're probably not going to answer it now, and that's fine. The membership fees are increasing by 54%. Most notable of that is the North Dakota League of Cities. Once again, why? Contracts for services is increasing by 9%. Most notable in that is the sanitation and streets. Once again, why? The city is deficit spending by over $2 million. Okay? Guys, all of you, or maybe you don't have a limited income. Most people have a limited income. So how do we deficit spend? That should not be happening. We have to cut back and say, listen, this is the money we have to spend. We can't continue to go to reserves, or whatever the case may be, or raise the taxes. We need to go within a budget, okay? Property validations. This beats me up every time, because you tell me we're gonna hold the mill levy straight. Great. But then you know what? You increase my property value, and my taxes go up $600 on average, okay? I'm just saying, average home. Now, we have about 10,000 homes in West Fargo. I'm not a mathematician, but you take 10,000 times 600, and we're pushing $2 million. Where's that money going to? Okay? The utility franchise fee. You know, as I'm getting older, and these other gentlemen that were up here as well, okay, you're throwing that utility franchise fee on there. You're increasing it. It's hitting everybody. Because they just turn it, Cass County Electric, whoever else it is gonna bring it right back to us. And in one of the things that you guys have, I printed, 2024 budget franchise, it says right here, the city well, it says Fargo in here, but I'm guessing this should say West Fargo, because we're in West Fargo, not Fargo. We'll also raise franchise fees from 2 to 4% in 2024. And that's on page 6 of the stuff that was printed out there. Everything else says Fargo, that says West Fargo. I'm not quite sure. Obviously, it's a typo. I'm okay with that, but at least something you need to look at there is these franchise fees go up. By the franchise fees going up, that generates another $1.7 million to the city of West Fargo. Total tax increases, okay, we're looking over $3.5 million. That's not insignificant. That's huge. We haven't seen, that I know of anyway, the sanitation study results. I'm guessing that the city of West Fargo is also going to raise the sanitation, the sewer and water fees, and so on and so forth. And then last but not least, the West Fargo events expense. There's nothing in the budget that shows what kind of money we're giving to West Fargo events. We're paying money for a parking ramp. That should be theirs, not ours. Those are things you need to look at. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Marquardt. Next speaker is Peter Heather. I'm sorry if I didn't say that correctly, sir, but.
It's okay.
All right. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. My name's Peter Hetwer, 1610 Maple Place, West Fargo, North Dakota. And which section, whether the budget section or the comment, I want to talk about the general spending and the taxing. So maybe I should have been in the first whatever. So my taxes went up 12.4%, which is inordinate again. Property valuation went up 7%. Periodically, I drop in over the years, and I always point out that whether you raise my property value or my mill levy, the total taxes is what I look at relative to inflation. I mean, it's, as some of the others said, is if you get an increase of 3 or 4% for income and you're getting 12.4% in property taxes, and then you look at your home insurance and that goes up over 10%, the numbers don't match. If you run the numbers out at some point, you're going to be priced out of your home. And it's not just the property tax. If you look at the water, sewer, garbage, right? A while back, the city grew, so we had to go away from our wells, so we went to Fargo, so the water rates doubled or tripled. So we're getting whatever you want to call it there. And then the sewer went up to match that. So there's hidden taxes or whatever you want to call them. Now, we use those features, but they went up where they used to be, might have included in the taxes. We voted in a sales tax for fire and police, right? And the saying was, well, if you vote for that, we won't raise your property taxes. Well, we voted for that, and I like it because it's a consumption tax, but my property taxes still went up 12.4%. So that's the thing is, as somebody mentioned, I'd really like to watch when you spend money. It's what I always see in government, and you guys have to see it in Washington and stuff, is let's spend, and if we need more, we'll just raise taxes. That's just wrong. It has to be fixed. At some point, you have to say no to people or whatever. One of the ways that I would offer is to cut property tax exemptions. And I printed out the last year's off the city website, and I brought this up before. The homeowners, the new-time homeowners, get a property tax exemption. Last year, you gave away $900,000. And one of the things of being a citizen of a city, you should pay your fair share. They should too. Why do you're taking our money to pay theirs? That should go away. Tax increment financing, $2.3 million. So over the last 3 years, and this is on the city website, if you want to round numbers, it's between $5 and $6 million of property taxes, exemptions you're giving people. Let them pay their fair share so the rest of us don't foot the bill. Somebody has to pay it, and it falls back on everybody else. The homeowners, the new ones should be easy, and some of the other ones should also, but they never go away. And one of the arguments is, well, later on, they will come on and they will pay their full share, so stuff will go down, right? But that never, ever happens. My taxes go up all the time. So that theory that they're going to be priced in, whether it's businesses or that, it doesn't work. So once you prove it false, let's drop it. And I think it was Horace did that, right? And they did a recall on the woman, right? And they did a recall and they voted, and she won 611 to 202 or something. So she won 3-1 on her stand to get rid of that. That should show you what people feel about that. Way back when we did it, we got one. We were here 30 years ago, right? But it wasn't our deciding factor. We go, let's ask for it. It's free money. But we were going to build here anyway. So anyway, summary is get rid of some of these tax exemptions so everybody pays their fair share. That should be right. The other is don't spend so much. When you multiply the value, the property values times this, you should have some budget. And if you increase my value or you increase I look at the net, which is how much I'm paying. Like some other people say, it just doesn't match. Businesses don't run that way. Our home budgets don't run that way. How come government does? It just seems like they just go, we don't care what we spend, we can just increase it. Water rate, sewer rate, property taxes, valuation, it just never ends. Having said all of that, one of the things, and the paper that comes out about the city, in general, I don't look at it because what I don't see can't bother me. But somewhere in there, I saw Mr. Simmons talked about they were going to do a salary study. You know, and they wanted $25,000 to do a salary study, and I can't remember if it was on TV, and you says, one of our guys should just get on the phone, call the other cities, it's a done deal. We don't need to spend $25,000. And that's the stuff I like to see. I mean, common sense, if it was your money, how would you spend it? Just don't throw some money at it because we're the government and we can do it. So that's, spend less, have everybody pay their fair share. That sounds reasonable.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next person is Matt Kidd.
I think I already spoke in that first bench. I re-speak.
If you signed up, we're going to afford you that opportunity. If you think that there's additional things you'd like to call to our attention.
Members of the group, the audience, have pretty well expressed my feelings. So I appreciate that. You know, as I said, it's the first time, so.
All right, thank you, sir.
Expressed everything good, but in agreement with the majority of things we said. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next person is Mr. Brad Schmidt. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Bernie. Brad Schmidt, 617 7th Avenue West. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the budget tonight. Property valuation for our home is increasing over 9% for the coming year. Our total tax bill is increasing over $250, now exceeding over $4,100 for the year. That's almost $350 a month just for taxes. Of that, the city portion is increasing over $130, now exceeding over $1,000 a year. That's almost $90 a month just for the city taxes, not including sewer, water, and garbage. I note too that the city continues to deficit spend in its budget, is now proposing to spend in excess of $2 million more than it collects. And I ask a simple question: why can't you demand that your city staff over here that's supposed to be so qualified can operate with a balanced budget? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. A former commissioner once said, this city does not have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And these people are proof of that in spades. They don't know how to deal with a budget. As a citizen, I note questionable operations by our city. Every week, we see 3 trucks and 4 employees driving the streets for garbage collection on Friday. There's a 1-man garbage truck, the 2-man chase truck for excessive garbage, and then there's the tree truck that routinely drives up and down the street looking for trees to pick up. It would seem pretty simple that your folks in the administration of this city could figure out how to handle those responsibilities. And we're challenged by a former commissioner one time before. But the response, as you recall, is, well, what would we do with those employees if we didn't have them doing that? I mean, seriously, think about that, folks. There are so many ways you could handle something that much more efficiently than running those trucks and employees up and down the streets looking for stuff to pick up when you've got the 1-man truck going already and picking it up. Our city spent well over $150,000 to install the no parking signs. You remember well my criticism of that, my very pointed criticisms of that when that took place. And it was all done without your approval. You made the motion to table it, and it was tabled, and it still remains a tabled item to this day, and yet the administration went ahead and did it without your approval. That is wrong. And yet, this summer, I have yet to see the street sweeper on 6th Street for over 6 weeks. And then last Friday, the day after our streets are supposed to be swept, here the street sweeper comes down 7th Avenue. Folks, this just makes no sense what your administrators are doing in terms of running this stuff. Nowhere in the 36-page document did I see any expenses, already been called out, West Fargo events. Again, another item I've been very critical of over the years. It was one of the first things that I questioned when I started looking at some of these city finances. And we were paying about $7,000 a month for that at the time. Last time I read of this thing, we're up over $440,000 a year, as reported in the forum. And what are we going to spend next year? And then the forum also reported that that expense was supposed to go down over time. How much more are we going to pay West Fargo events? Is there a ceiling on that? Is there an end to that? How much more are we going to pay that, and why? What benefit does that do me? All the while I'm looking at our streets in Old Town West Fargo, and again, you're well aware of this, you talked about it, are deteriorating. I'm going to go out to Menards and buy a couple bags of cold patch and fill in the holes in front of my hole because your city crews are obviously not going to do it. And they just get getting worse and worse, bigger and bigger. And I've told you that before. You walk along the streets and you look there, pretty soon you start seeing the understructure, the sewer and water pipes and stuff that expose from that too. You know, it just makes no sense whatsoever. Last, what is the status of the lagoon decommissioning? There's not a word that I can see in the document of this ordeal. The last I saw of it was that your man Anvik was asking for $150,000 for a bulldozer, but he didn't have anybody to operate, but he thought it was a good buy, and he thought we should get it. Well, thankfully, you guys said no. Okay? There's no detail of any reference to this. What's the status of it? Is it coming to an end soon? And if it does come to an end soon, hopefully, what are we going to do with all the equipment that we purchased to take care of that? Thank you for your time and concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. That concludes the list that we have for public comment on the West Fargo budget. I would ask if there's anybody else in the room that didn't get on the sign-on sheet that would like to be. Public hearing is closed. Commissioners, this is not an item that is actionable this evening unless you choose to do so. We've gotten some great input from some of our taxpayers, so my suggestion is that we move this on to a future commission meeting and look into some of the ideas and suggestions that were brought forth by our taxpayers this evening. But I serve as the pleasure of the commission of what you would like to do. Suggestions, comments? Move forward, continue it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right.
I'm fine. Yeah.
I got 5 nod heads, so that's a nodding of heads, not nod heads, nodding of heads. No comments from the gallery on that one, please. With that, we'll move on to item number 3. This is a tabled item from previous September 5th, 2023 meeting regarding the first reading of A23-23 zoning ordinance amendment to the Title IV of the city ordinances pertaining to wall graphics and signs. We're going to call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, our planning director. Mr. Nelson, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, President Dardis, and good evening, Commissioners. One moment here while I pull up the staff report. All right. So, as was just mentioned, this is a request for zoning ordinance amendment to Title IV of the city ordinances pertaining to wall graphic signs. Discussion and public hearing on this item was held at your last meeting on September 5th. At that meeting, concerns were raised regarding potential difficulties in removing painted signs, which is what essentially what wall graphic signs are, at the time a business moves or closes. Ultimately, this item was tabled to tonight's meeting with a suggestion that staff explore alternative options for allowing wall graphic signs as a conditional use. Just a few items to note in follow-up to last time we discussed this last 2 weeks ago. Regarding the concerns raised regarding removal of the painted signs, 2 sections of the existing code are noted within the staff report here. The first is regarding one of the list of prohibited signs does include any business signs which advertise activity, businesses, or services no longer produced or conducted upon the premises. So I just wanted to quickly note that we do have language on the books today that does give some teeth, I guess, to enforcement when it comes to vacant businesses. Also, there is another section in here that just speaks to inspection, any sign requiring a permit, which a painted wall graphic would, if approved, is subject to inspection and may be ordered to be removed if it's not maintained in accordance with the sign ordinance and other regulations. So just wanted to note that. Had I kind of been more aware of that at the last meeting, I would have pointed that out during discussion. And then in regards to the specifics of the ordinance amendment itself, included in your meeting packet is an updated version of the ordinance, essentially taking the recommendation of the City Commission and allowing or continuing to include wall graphics as a prohibited type of sign, with the caveat that except as approved as a conditional use, subject to following the conditional use procedures as established by the city. So essentially allowing wall graphic signs only if approved by the City Commission with a conditional use permit. So that is the one change from the last time that you heard this. Included in this packet also, just for reference, is the ordinance as presented at the last meeting. Ultimately, staff is comfortable with either version. However, there are probably some advantages to the conditional use permit, specifically if there are concerns regarding removing paint during winter time, for example. I think that came up at the discussion last time, which is certainly a valid concern. And so with the conditional use permit, it does allow the city to place certain conditions on any approved signage. Some of those conditions could relate to the type of material being used, whether it's some of the more modern techniques like I think there's vinyl applications that are very similar to paint, but that potentially could be removed a little bit more easily than paint. That gives the city to get into some of those details at the time of permitting. The only thing that staff would note in relation to the conditional use permit option is that the review of the permit application would need to be content neutral in relation to the sign. So you couldn't really make a determination on whether or not to approve the sign based on the content of the sign or the aesthetic of the sign. So with that, quick update and amended ordinance as included in your packet here tonight. The recommendation is to, the recommended action for you tonight is to hold the first reading of the ordinance. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners, Commissioner Olson. Excuse me.
I'll direct this towards our city attorney. Since we held a public hearing and then we tabled it, do we have to reopen the public hearing, or what we held back then was good enough to meet that criteria?
Great question. Aaron and I specifically spoke about that. You do not need to hold another public hearing because the substance of the ordinance change isn't changing materially from the public hearing notice. You're just changing procedurally how you want to handle that type of approval process.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Nelson? Okay. Commissioners, how would you like to move forward on this?
Make a motion to approve.
Commissioner George moves to approve the first reading of the A23-23 zoning ordinance amendment to Title IV of the city ordinances pertaining to wall grassing. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries on a 4-1 vote. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Item number 4, A23-12, the Wilds North Pond First Edition, approval of the final plot and associated conveyance of land. Again, Mr. Aaron Nelson, our Planning Director, City of West Fargo. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. So this is a request for approval of the final plat of the Wilds North Pond First Edition, along with associated deeds and easement documents that go along with that plat. The purpose of this request is to address a couple of outstanding items and issues from past subdivisions in this area regarding primarily the manner in which public stormwater ponds are managed and maintained. The plat includes 3 existing lots, which have brought up an aerial image here on the screen in front of you. The plat area includes 2 residential lots as well as 1 city stormwater pond lot. It also includes, just for the record, a small sliver of previously unplatted land. All this property, the subject property, is located west of Cheyenne Street and south of 47th Avenue West in West Fargo. And then I will just pull open the plat here for a quick rundown of what's going on here. So, essentially, if you're looking at the plat here, the lot on the west side, the left-hand side here, proposed lot 1, that's the existing city stormwater pond. On the east side of that pond, the city owns an approximate 60-foot wide strip of land, specifically on the east side of the pond. Everywhere else, to the northwest, south, the city owns essentially up to the normal water line of the pond. And so kind of the standard way, the standard practice for ponds such as these is that the adjacent private property owner would own all the way up to the water line of the pond, and then there would be an easement surrounding the pond for stormwater storage as well as any sort of maintenance that may be needed for that pond. But the owner would own up to the water line, the owner would mow and maintain that area as well. And so that's typically how things are done. That's the intent of this plat here, is essentially to bring that property line from 60 feet away from the water line all the way up to the water line. And so the deeds that I mentioned the intent would be for the city to convey ownership of that 60-foot, roughly 60-foot swath of land to the adjacent owners, and then for the owners to enter into an agreement for, or to provide the city with permanent easements for long-term stormwater storage as well as maintenance, which is consistent with how basically the city's standard practice for these types of ponds, and would be consistent with how the pond is on the north, the west, and the south there. So on the plat here, you can kind of see some of those easement lines as they exist around the pond. That's essentially the intent here, is to do the same thing on the east side. This plat was actually approved by the City Commission back in January of 2021. However, the plat was never signed and never recorded, and kind of sat for a couple of years here until we could bring some attention to it and bring the owners in to kind of bring it across the finish line. The owners are interested in drawing water from the pond as well as running stormwater to the pond, and so it's kind of a win-win for all parties involved, if you will. The city does not, city staff anyway, is not interested in owning the adjacent land and would prefer that the adjacent owners own and maintain that strip. So that's an overview of what's going on here. Included in the packet are the quitclaim deeds to the property as well as the easement that would run essentially over top of the deeded property. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard and recommended approval of this plat at their May 9th, 2023 meeting, and the recommendation for you tonight is to, again, approve the final plat as well as the associated deed and easement documents. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff.
Commissioners, questions? Clarify for me, was this initiated by the property owner or by the city of West Fargo?
I believe it was a little bit of both, and I might rely on Dustin to fill in some of the details here. But essentially, the property owners are interested in drawing water from the pond. To do so, they would need to run a pipe across the city-owned land. And so, and that's where I'll maybe hand it over for some of the detailed discussion previously.
So I can.
Mr. Shockley, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. I'll give some of the technical background, and then I'll hand it off to Dustin to give kind of some of the administrative background. This originally started because there was a surveying error in legal descriptions between the pond area and one of the adjoining lots. And so there was a sliver of land that by title nobody owned. It was maybe a half acre or less, and just a little sliver between the pond and the private property owners. And so, and Aaron's kind of got his mouse where that was located. And so initially, when we started the process, the replatting was just to clean up that title flaw issue. And then as we went through the platting process, and as part of our normal process, we asked a lot of questions, and they were running infrastructure to draw water from the pond to water their lawns, which we allow a lot of residents to do. And so we wanted to make sure that there was appropriate access easements for them for the property owners to draw water from the lake, or from the pond, and then also to include a flowage easement, so as the pond bounces up and down, we have the right to store water temporarily on their property. I can turn it over to Dustin for the administrative issues, but it started purely as a technical cleanup, and it's taken a little bit of time to get it past the finish line.
I think John summed it up very well, so nothing to add.
So all parties are in favor of this, is my point.
Yes, they are.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions?
Make a motion to approve?
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Wilds North Pond First Edition, approval of final plat and associated conveyance of the land as outlined in the packet. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 5 is a downtown master plan update, informational only. There's no action to be taken this evening. Again, we'll call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, our planning director for the city of West Fargo.
Thank you. So for this item, I'll try and keep it brief here, but really I just wanted to kind of get this really back on the city commissioners, you all, your radar in terms of some of the next steps here. It's probably been a few months since I last talked about this item in front of the city commission. So just want to provide a quick rundown of where we're at today and what to expect in the next couple of months as we start to kind of land this plane, if you will, in terms of some of the documentation and final recommendations. So I'll start with a very quick overview of the project, just to kind of provide a quick frame of reference before walking through just a few quick slides here. At the end of 2022, the city received a $100,000 planning grant award, which was really the catalyst for kicking off this project in early 2023. At that time, 4 primary focus areas were identified to be included in this study, including placemaking, which is including public art and various public activity. Business and economic development was another category. Parking and access was another point of discussion. And then finally, physical development, including such things as infill, redevelopment, and future land use. So those were the four primary topic areas we were looking to really dive into with this study. The planning process kicked off this past spring with a series of public engagement opportunities. One of the big ones was really a public survey that was open to the general public. The project itself is guided by a steering committee. Commissioner Anderson sits on that steering committee and is a representative of the City Commission. We've got representation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as a number of other partner agencies, as well as citizens and business owners. That project, or the public engagement, has been a kind of a primary piece of this project since the get-go and has really informed discussion over the life of the project. Jumping into the project schedule here, I've got a few slides that I'll kind of walk through quickly. Again, starting in early May, the project itself is broken down into 4 different kind of topic areas, starting with existing conditions and goal settings. That's where really a brunt of the public input came into the process and really started to, the project team really focused in on identifying some issues and areas of concern or areas of celebration from the public is really the main focus of some of that survey. In July, the plan focus areas and some strategy development is really what the team focused in on, which I'll talk about in a minute here, but really focusing in on how to address a number of the issues and different topic areas that were identified through much of the public input process. In August and September, that's where we're at today. The planning team is really focusing on plan development, so starting to actually draft the skeleton, if you will, of the plan document. And starting to, again, refine some of those ultimate recommendations. Looking forward into this fall and early winter is really finalizing some of the implementation strategy and then putting that final document together for you all to review. I'll kind of breeze through these. I don't want to take up too much of your time tonight, but this was a graphic from some of the early public inputs, just identifying some of those issues and opportunities for the downtown area. Safety was the #1 concern, and the caveat here, the thing to note here is it's really pedestrian and bicycle vehicular type safety. It's not crime safety. So that was a big thing is just the speed of traffic through downtown, especially along Cheyenne and Main Avenue were 2 of the primary factors there. So that was #1. You can see some of the other categories in terms of how they ranked. Ultimately, the project team took the input and using some of our existing guiding documentation, such as the West Fargo 2.0 comprehensive plan. They really kind of took that all and distilled it down into 6 key themes, which are shown on the slide here. Those themes and issues are kind of how the project team ended up focusing in on or drafting a number of different action steps or potential recommendations that may be considered in the final plan here. They're still vetting through those, but that was some of the work of the most recent steering committee meetings, as well as a more recent public survey, which last time I checked, that survey was still active on the project website if anybody's interested in providing any feedback in terms of some of the potential recommendations. The goal there is to really, again, distill it down into recommendations that are realistic and actionable. So reviewing some of these opportunities based on the potential impact they have, as well as their perceived level of effort, are kind of the criteria that the team is using, and hoping, again, to distill those down into some manageable recommendations here. Ultimately, all this kind of boils down into some proposed goals. Again, these goals correlate to those 4 primary focus areas that we started with. Really just kind of making them more specific, more actionable was the emphasis here. So ultimately, when you start to see some of the final documentation, you might see some of these 6 categories that came from the public input, as well as these 4 goals that we started with. You'll start to see how some of these recommendations align with some of these kind of direction-setting inputs, if you will. And then running in parallel to the work of the steering committee and the project team, well, I should say the project team is also working with the Public Art Advisory Committee on some of the public art component to the plan. The Public Art Advisory Committee has identified 3 different locations for potential public art downtown, including the entrance to downtown on Main and Cheyenne Street as one potential location. The existing public art locations along the reconstructed Cheyenne Street between Main and 7th. I think there's roughly 9 predetermined locations for future art installation included within the roadway design currently. And then lastly, at the southern end of 7th and Cheyenne is an additional opportunity for public art. And so this is kind of a sneak peek of what you might see in the plan document. The team did have a sub-consultant on staff that was able to put out an RFP for select artists to provide art proposals for these 3 locations downtown. The art committee did review several different submittals for each of those locations and then submitted those recommendations on to the project steering committee for further review. So there's just some samples included in the slides here just to kind of give you a sneak peek of some of the material here. So really the last slide here is some of the next steps, and this is what I wanted to, again, mainly bring your attention to. So I provided a brief update to the Planning and Zoning Commission last week. I'm here tonight to kind of bring your attention to it as well. Looking forward again into October. October 1st is really or the end of September is really the close of the grant window. And so we need to have a draft document by the end of the month. And so we anticipate having that in the next couple of weeks here. Once we have that and we have it reviewed, we'll kind of have a staff review process, clean it up a little bit, and then ultimately get it posted on the project website for public review. At that point in time, Planning and Zoning Commission, City Commission, anybody else is invited to review and provide comment on that document. And then in November, once we'll kind of take the public comments we hear or any additional feedback that we hear, refine the document further. And at that point in time, we'll probably have some type of a detailed conversation with the Planning and Zoning and City Commission at that time to go over a lot of the recommendations in terms of how they ultimately shook out, leading up to the November-December timeframe, at which point we'll hope to circle back yet again with the final draft for consideration. So a lot more detail to come in terms of what that will actually look like, in terms of dates and actual specifics in terms of the opportunity for comment and things. But again, just wanted to get it on your radar, just to kind of keep an eye out for additional correspondence from myself or other project team members in the next couple of months here. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, this is an information-only item at this point in time, but we'll have additional opportunity for input and discussion in the not-too-distant future. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Commissioners, questions? Do you have a plan with posted for public review and comment? Do you have venues, or is it all going to be here at City Hall, or are we going to have some outreach within the community to share with the public what the findings are?
Yep. So those are the details that have yet to be determined, but at the very minimum, we will have it posted on the project website. A link to the project website is available on the city's website. We have been working very closely with communication staff in terms of getting the different surveys and different opportunities pushed out to the general public. So it'll be a multifaceted approach, I'd say. But again, details to follow.
Depending on how big that might be, I would hope that we would consider for the public review, maybe the lobby of one of the buildings that is downtown, the Cheyenne Place or Pioneer Place. There are some, I hate to, specifically the area in front of the Onstead Twitchell's offices, and as you go upstairs to the other more engineering, maybe that space could house that for a day or two or something like that. I think the more that we can expose this to the public, the better it will be for them to understand how we're going to move forward with this.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you for that information, Mr. Nelson. Next order of business is item number 6. That's the roundabout at 9th Street West and 52nd Avenue West. Mr. Dan Hansen, City Engineer for the City of West Fargo. And the purpose of this discussion this evening is to create an improvement district, number 2276, and approve an engineer's report. Good evening, Mr. Hansen, and welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and fellow commissioners. On your agenda tonight are two separate roundabouts that I'm bringing forward, and we'll have obviously a discussion of each one of them. On a side note, happy National Roundabout Week that started today, and so it's coincidental, but it was brought to my attention that we should celebrate that, so I've done my due diligence there. Jumping into the roundabout at 9th Street and 52nd Avenue West, there was a traffic study that was completed in 2021, and in that traffic study, it recommended that within the next 5 years, a roundabout be constructed at that intersection. This is being brought forward. I know we're only 2 years into that 5-year window that they had suggested in that study. However, the city has been contacted by Legacy Elementary for the number of students that they have crossing 52nd Avenue, and they don't feel that the current crosswalk is as safe as we can provide for them. So we took a look at a couple different options. Obviously, the two things that we mainly look at are signalization of an intersection and installing of a roundabout. The signalization of an intersection was problematic with respect to we need our fiber optic system to control the signals, and the closest fiber optics that we have to that intersection is 1.5 miles away, so we don't have the infrastructure in the neighborhood for that. But the other thing is that we do on an annual basis submit for public or for grant funding for major corridors. We're in the process of, in 2025, we'll be reconstructing 9th Street Northeast with that funding. Several other major corridors that we submit for include the reconstruction of 52nd Avenue from Cheyenne to 9th is in the future for us to submit for that. A signal at that intersection is not warranted, and if we were to install an unwarranted signal when we apply for those grant funding dollars, we would not be able to receive them without removing that signal. So we feel that the roundabout is the safest way to address these to address the situation that we have, and to go back and complete what was recommended in the traffic study. Tonight in your packet is an engineer's report, an improvement district map, and associated resolutions for your approval. Right now, bringing these roundabouts forward per the 2022 CIP that was passed, there was a policy in there for regional reconstructs to be 80% assessed, 20% city costs. Obviously, the city commission is able to decide what funding that we want to use for the source, but I wanted to while I'm making this presentation, I wanted to show where we started from and why we started from an assumption of those assessments. So it's basically following that policy. Jumping into the engineer's report, with those assessments, the total cost of the project, which I believe to be a conservative number, would be $2,755,000. This would be a large roundabout. Those are the ones that people are more in favor of and seem to work better than the smaller ones that we have around town. And with this being a major corridor, the design would be for a larger roundabout with likely some skip lanes or something like that for westbound traffic as well as northbound to go eastbound. With the cost of that project and with the presumption of the assessments tonight, we have and I'm going to jump down in the packet to the assessment map that we put together. Obviously, the intersection that we're talking about is 9th Street West and 52nd Avenue West, and we drew this assessment boundary. On the south side, it would include all of the Wilds development. On the north side of 52nd, it would include everything between 52nd and approximately halfway to 40th, because with the assumption that half of it funnels south, half of it funnels to the north, and also follows previous assumptions that we've used in the past. To go east, we go as far as Cheyenne Street, and if you'll notice the properties that we were just talking about in the Wilds North Pond First Edition, those are included in the assessment district, but we do not anticipate in assessing those properties as they have their driveways, direct access to Cheyenne Street. So we are, again, including them in the district, but we do not anticipate that we would recommend that an assessment be placed on those properties.
You restate that, Dan,
Yeah,
point that
absolutely.
again, and you have a pointer or whatever.
Yep, the properties that are hatched, right, along Cheyenne Street, those are properties that they're directly facing Cheyenne Street. That's where their driveways are access to Cheyenne Street. And so they are included in the assessment district, which is this dashed boundary. However, even though they're included in the district, it doesn't necessarily mean that all properties within a district are assessed. If you recall the Sand Hills 6th Edition assessment district, it included all properties north into the Sand Hills 3rd Edition. However, the assessments were directed with a feasibility study that showed here are the parcels that we would be assessing within the district. So, the district is drawn a little bit broader than what we would anticipate to actually assess, but we taking it all the way to Cheyenne Street. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. With the amount of properties that we have in the assessment district, the estimated assessment that we would have on a single-family residential property would be estimated to be $1,200, which would be assessed over a 25-year period based off of the initial study that was done and the costs. Again, that is based off of an 80% assessment with the project. And again, final, whether it's assessed, percentages of assessments would come down to what the commission feels and the assessment committee would feel to be assessed with it. So with that, that's the project in front of you, and I would entertain any questions.
Question, Commissioner George.
Okay, since you are not a school person at the school, I don't know if you'll be able to answer these questions or not, but you said this was initiated by the school for safety reasons. And those hours of safety reasons, was that primarily kids going to school and going home from school? Is that primarily the hours in concern?
In the peak hours, and let me rephrase it, the project isn't initiated by the school, it was initiated by me, but we have had the school contact us asking if we can do something to increase the safety at the intersection. And that's when we pulled out the study and said it's time to, I said it's time to bring this forward based off of the growing number of people that are crossing that. There was a traffic analysis that was done last year, and in peak hours, in a 1 hour period, there was approximately 100 students that crossed 52nd, and we can see the Wilds and how many houses are being built over there. That number surely has increased since then and would increase again by the time that we get to next summer and into the future.
Okay, so are traffic guards still a thing at elementary schools? You know, like before and after school? Like, I mean, I did it when I was in elementary school. Is that still a thing where people stand out there with the stop?
You do still see that?
They do, I think, but not on 52nd. They do at the elementary.
They do it certainly at South
Yeah,
Elementary.
so,
Right, so that's what I'm
Typically-
wondering. I mean, instead of spending millions of dollars,
well,
we just have crosswalk people during school hours?
so
Commissioner Simmons.
thank you if I make the comments, not just during school hours. I went by there the other day through there, and it is very busy. And all those homes are putting up right on the south side of 52nd. That'd be north of you. It's huge. There's so many homes out there. So
Yeah, and if you take a look right now on it is not only being brought forward only for the pedestrian traffic during the peak pedestrian hours. It is, the study that was done was based off of future traffic projections. So it's a vehicle movement project as well.
So the discussion has been the roundabout. Are we talking about 9th Street too? With regard to a crossing of 52nd for those students that live in the Wilds 21st and 22nd edition? We're not, are we?
No, this is just a roundabout at 9th and 52nd.
So when you're talking about students crossing 52nd At what point are you talking about?
During,
Answer.
during peak hours of when school gets, right before school, right after school, pedestrians crossing 52nd from the Wilds to go north to the elementary school.
Commissioner Olson?
So currently, there's no crosswalk there?
There is a crosswalk
There
there
is.
currently, and
But nobody's obeying it when there's a student, or,
the comments you typically have are, you go out there and watch the crosswalk during the peak hours and watch the students looking both ways trying to, and the cars are just going and everybody's in a hurry to get to work and things. Not in your packets if you'd like. I did print out just a conceptual drawing of what the roundabout would look like in that intersection.
So I'm just curious how installing a roundabout is gonna make it safer if nobody's watching for the kids or any pedestrian.
I don't understand
now.
how the discussion of safety with the roundabout with regard to students coming from the Wilds 21st and 22nd edition. I live on 52nd. There's times I count up to 80 cars at the existing roundabout backed up on 52nd past 9th Street.
Perhaps I presented this wrong, and what I'm getting is that the commission heard me say that this is simply a pedestrian crossing project, and that's a component of it. It will make it safer for the pedestrians crossing it, and we were contacted by the elementary school, asked if we could do something about that. But irregardless of any pedestrian crossings, the traffic study was based off of traffic counts. It was based off of people that aren't, especially when people are, dropping their kids off, trying to leave, trying to take left turns coming from the north to the south and to head east on 52nd. They're queued up because they have to wait for everybody taking a right out of the Wilds. And so that traffic just gets queued up to the north of the intersection. With a roundabout, it would keep everything moving, and everybody would have a lane that they would be able to be in.
There's also right at 9th Street, just immediately to the west, one of the electronic signs that tells you it's a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone and how fast they're traveling. This evening, while I was coming into here, 5 vehicles were going west. The slowest one was driving 46 miles an hour of the 4.
Mm-hmm.
I made a special note to note that. So, but as you go down further, does the speed reduce where, the students come out to go to the elementary school?
You're talking on 52nd to the
Yes,
west
sir.
of this intersection?
If we're talking about student safety, that has to be a component, I would think.
I don't see this as a safer option because it just keeps people moving, which is almost what we don't want, is keeping people moving. We want them to slow down and to stop.
Kids aren't going to be able to cross.
Well,
Right.
I see that they only have to cross one lane at a time versus the whole north-south quadrant there. You break it up just a little bit there, so it's just a little bit of traffic. They only have to look the one direct. I can see how it would make it a little bit safer. You can get into that middle section there.
I did include in the engineer's report on the paragraph that I stole it out of a magazine recently, and I can also produce additional data on roundabouts and safety as well. But I'll read from that excerpt from that magazine. It says, roundabouts are more pedestrian friendly than traditional intersections. Since traffic flows in a single directions, vehicles are much easier for the pedestrian to spot. So the people that are walking towards the roundabout only have one direction to look for traffic. Roundabouts also feature slower speeds, shortened crosswalks, and a pedestrian refuge in the splitter island when those are constructed. These design features add up to a safer environment for pedestrians and cyclists. I do have a litany of other data I can provide, not with me tonight, as far as safety features of roundabouts. There's been many studies that have been done, but I get it. If I go to a signal, it stops, it tells me to stop, and it tells the pedestrians, you can walk now. There's definitely safety features in signalized intersections as well. But again, going back to the signalization of the intersection, it takes away the potential for future funding from that grant source that we get through MetroCog. as well, as it is an unwarranted signal on a collector.
At what level would it become warranted? What level of traffic? Do you know there's a certain threshold we have to meet?
There's I can't remember, it was 6 or 9 different criterias that you would need to meet one of the criterias, and it's a whole factor of things. I believe accidents, number of
I was just
cars,
curious how
yep.
close we would be to not jeopardize, if we would not do this, but.
Right now, I believe we're a ways away. We don't have as much traffic coming from the west right now at full build-out. We can always do traffic counts and look for warrants. Right now, it isn't warranted. Whether it is or not, the thing is the warrant might happen during the peak hour, but the warrants for signals doesn't just look at peak hour, it's all day. It's how much, it has to be an intersection that is constantly busy, or not just in the peak hours as well. Peak hours is a factor, but definitely.
The traffic pattern has changed dramatically since Horse Middle School and High School has opened up, because that's a collection area for those students go south. And so there's no question that the traffic out there is, for about an hour and a half every morning, it is amazing, the people coming out of that from the south. Commissioner.
Thank you. I guess I just go back, when I look at this, I go back quite a few years now and straight to the east of there on Cheyenne Street and 52nd. Years ago, there was a girl killed there because it was a four-way stop, and they didn't stop. This at least slows those vehicles down. It may not prevent, but it slows them down. If not, they're going right over the top of that baby. So, and I think about that all the time, because I was here when that happened. It was a very sad deal, and maybe could have prevented if we would have had one of these in there. Thank you.
Yeah, from a traffic perspective, roundabouts are very much safer than regular intersections, because you don't have any T-bones, any head-to-head crashes. Everything that you have is basically side swipes, and everybody does need to slow down. Rarely will you see it where Commissioner Dardis mentioned the traffic going 45 miles an hour. They're not going 45 miles an hour through a roundabout, or they're squealing their tires on purpose and should be written up. But and obviously law enforcement on policing speeds, things of that nature. It's tough to do any traffic calming on a major collector. It's not something that you put speed bumps in or anything like that. So it's more of a policing issue for that. You could put additional signs, but we do have adequate signing out there right now. It's just people choosing to go faster than the posted speed limit.
Any additional questions, Commissioners? Commissioner George.
Going forward, if we're continuing to do things for schools, and I believe in school safety, children's safety, obviously, but if we're looking, whether it's stoplights or a roundabout or whatever it is, at what point do we go to the schools or work with the schools to help pay for these types of projects, instead of just special assessing 80% out to the neighborhood that may or may not have kids in school?
That's a good question. As far as an assessment policy for it, you can take a look at users, you can take a look at different things. As of right now, the way it's presented, which can change at your pleasure, is that we took areas that would be identified as funneling areas towards the intersection.
Mr. Scott, would you clarify for the public, is the school, the school is obviously in the assessment district. Is the school district assessed?
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
I realize that it is. I'd like you to state it and how that assessment goes based on, they got substantial acres there. I think the minimum for elementary school in West Fargo right now is 8 to 10 acres or something like that.
sure.
Public information, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. So right now, our special assessment policy does address how to allocate out transportation projects like this. Typically, when you get to the point of allocating out the assessments, you start by going through the Special Assessment Commission. We always use our policy as the basis of the starting point, but the Special Assessment Commission does have that authority to assign benefit based on how they feel the certain project is benefiting the district. So, but the simple answer to your question is yes, there is a certain methodology used for assessing out the school.
Commissioner George asked a great question, and I just wanted that clarified to the public that those acreages for that elementary school for Legacy, they are assessed as well. School district does participate. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hanson on item number 6?
I'd make a motion to create the improvement district and approve the engineer's report.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the engineer's report and create an improvement district number 2276 for a roundabout at 9th Street West and 52nd Avenue West, as presented this evening. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes on a 3-2 vote. Item number 7 is to discussion about a roundabout at 23rd Avenue East and 6th Street East. Mr. Dan Hanson, City Engineer, will be presenting. It is regarding to create an improvement district number 2280 and an improvement engineer's report. Mr. Hanson. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. The second roundabout on the agenda tonight is at 23rd Avenue East and 6th Street East. This is on the southwest corner of the Costco property, where you go north to get to the Duluth Trading Company. We've seen an increased level of traffic in that corridor with the commercial development that we've had. There's also additional commercial development that has happened to the west, as well as to the south on 6th, and we know DMF Properties have intentions of developing the open areas that are near the Duluth Trading Company as well. So we anticipate a lot more traffic coming. Right now, if you recall, we do have a signal going in at Blue Stem and 23rd. That is under contract right now. There have been 2 traffic studies that have been done on this corridor. Both of those traffic studies indicated roundabouts as well. One even indicated a roundabout at Blue Stem and 23rd. However, that would have been intrusive into the Costco parking lot. We didn't go in that direction. With the intersection of 6th and 23rd, the recommendation was for a roundabout. It took a look at both signalization again and also having a roundabout there. The reason against signalization at this intersection is with the signal at Veterans, and now we are having another signal that's coming at Blue Stem and 23rd. To put another signal at 6th would be 3 signals placed back to back to back. The timing, the coordination, the queuing, things of that nature, whereas a roundabout releases traffic fluidly through that. The other thing is at full build-out in the 2021 study that was done, it showed that the roundabout would provide a much better level of service than a signal once we add the additional traffic in the future to those future developed properties. Again, I'm starting at the starting point of having an assessment district for a regional intersection reconstruction here. And then I will jump down into just to show you what we were looking at and give you a basis of how this improvement district was put together. And it's basically, it's the commercial district that is neighboring that intersection that is providing the vast amount of traffic to the intersection. So when we got together to put together this improvement district, the dashed line that you see around it includes the Costco area, the open area that we expect to be developed here in the near future, as well as on the north side of 23rd Avenue. Those businesses have provided a lot of traffic coming to and from as well. And then also the traffic that would be funneling north from 6th Street East adjacent to that property. We did not assess, we're not proposing assessing anybody on Blue Stem Drive or any of the properties on the south side of 23rd Avenue East, as we did not feel that they were producing the traffic to the intersection as as proposed. So right now, the way that we're proposing this improvement district, it is just the commercial properties within that corridor, because this is a commercial district. Moving back to the engineer's report, the total estimated cost for this, and again, I believe this to be a conservative number, for this roundabout is $2,052,000. And I do not have a breakdown on it, where the other one I had, you know, the estimated cost for a single-family residential unit was the $1,200. I do not have a cost per property here, because all of the properties, it would be on a square footage basis. So it'd just be dependent upon the size of the property. So obviously Costco would be bearing the brunt of a decent amount of the assessments, as well as some of the larger properties to the north and the west of the intersection. That is the rationale of how the district was created. And again, we're moving this forward with the anticipation of a lot more traffic that's going to be coming upon it. It's more of a build it before we put an extra 1,500 cars per hour onto the streets, and then having to shut it down to do improvements at that point. I believe this is the best solution for the intersection, and with that, I would entertain any questions about this project.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Questions, Commissioner?
I have one.
Sorry, Commissioner Anderson.
So anytime I've gone through that intersection, sightlines are an issue. I can't see traffic. So if I'm leaving Costco or Duluth Trading Company from the north and I want to turn east on 23rd, I'm looking west on 23rd, I can't see vehicles coming. Will a roundabout help with that? Or will that not resolve the sightline issues?
No, I believe so. Just as the other one, I did print out an example.
A little bit better, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're headed southbound on 6th Street East, first of all, everybody, again, would be needing to slow down going into the roundabout, so it does calm the traffic a little bit in that respect. The other thing is the only direction that you would need to look at would be east. So basically, if you are coming into that roundabout, just north of even that median, if you take a look at the sight distance between where I'm showing the red medians, you can draw a line between the two of them, and you would, I believe that is approximately about 200 feet of sight distance that you would have east of the roundabout going into it. And then you would, again, only need to be, you wouldn't need to worry about looking on who's coming from the east or the south, obviously. It's just taking a look at who's coming around from the east. So there should be plenty of sight distance and sight lines. It does meet any design criteria for sight distances.
Your issue was looking towards the west, right?
Right. Yep, so I might not see an approaching vehicle coming, and being a defensive driver, I need to make sure that I'm watching all drivers, including those. If I'm in the roundabout and they're supposed to yield to me, they may not. And so that might still be tough to see.
Traffic coming from the west?
Yeah.
I guess the only thing that I would say to that would be is they do have a yield sign when they see you coming, as opposed to a stopped and a through condition. So if they enter in while you're in the roundabout, obviously they would be in the wrong, but it happens. Drive the roundabout downtown Fargo. It's people in the area still need to learn how to drive roundabouts, definitely, but with more of them coming online, the education is getting there.
Well, people don't realize that they need to yield to the left when they're in a roundabout. They think it's always yield to the right, which is everywhere else. But in a roundabout, you have to yield to the traffic to the left, and we just haven't caught on.
Yep, when the only real direction you need to look is who's coming from the left and can I slip in there? Once you get in there, they're supposed to be looking to the left to see if they can slip in either in front or behind of you. Whether they do or not, again, it's up to the traffic.
Additional questions?
I have one more question.
Please.
If you don't mind. All right, is this final design? Because I'm assuming that this red stuff is kind of like probably a brick or a decorative concrete thing, and I feel like we're becoming the city of concrete. Veterans Avenue, or, Veterans Drive, whatever, it's a lot of concrete there. And so that's something that I've, been noticing a lot lately, and would like to see some sort of, I don't know, just less of that, whether it's trees or other things. And even in the previous item that we discussed too, but I feel like we're losing, we're creating this concrete world, that we're living in now. And so if we can have things that are not so much that and maybe more green space.
We would likely design this so that there would be some vegetative features in the center of the roundabout. You typically would not put any vegetative growth into those medians that you pointed out. Because you don't want them to, number of reasons, you don't want it to grow high enough that it obstructs the view of any drivers, for one thing. The other thing is even if something grows 1 foot tall, you take a small kid crossing over it, you don't want them to be obstructed in it. So you do want to have that open. So yes, it would be planned on having some form of a pavement surface in there, which would likely be a stamped colored concrete, that type of a thing in there. Is this a final design? No, this is only a concept that was taken out of the report. There was a couple different concepts. I just printed this off before the meeting to give an example of it. If this moves forward, the next step would be for us to do some interviews with the design team to make sure that they're going to provide the service that we want to do this, eventually enter into the contract for it, and we would bring back a design contract from the engineer, and then we would be moving on to design at that point. So,
Thank you.
Commissioner George?
Okay, please correct me if I'm wrong. Just west of 6th, east of that retention pond, isn't that where we just approved for the low-income senior housing to go? So how does that, I see that they would be within that special, that improvement district, which I'm assuming we don't want to special assess the low-income senior housing that we just approved with their pilot.
Well, they're paying special assessments now, the property owners are, and they would continue to pay those
At the present
at the
rate.
present rate.
So do
right?
we, want to add special assessments to them?
Mr. Scott?
Thank you. Just not to step in here, but procedurally, that brings up a good point, Commissioner George. So with a street project like this, once you've approved an engineer's report, the next step in the technical administrative process is to conduct a resolution of necessity, which is where we will reach out to all the properties within the district and have a vote on whether or not they want to do the project. It's more or less, they have an opportunity to protest against that project, but I think that would be a great opportunity to outreach, and then you could somewhat poll the interest or gauge the interest of the properties within the assessment district through that process.
Great question, Commissioner.
Okay, I'll just say I was kind of on board with this, but I'm not gonna, if that's in the district at all, I don't think I can support.
And I did not bring the resolution of necessity forward with both of these projects because I first wanted to see if we're proceeding with the projects. Once we,
You'll still have an opportunity to check that if that's what you'd like. If this moves forward, if it doesn't move forward this evening, nothing's going to happen.
I just hate voting for something initially where it's in it, just because, like I said, it doesn't seem like things change a whole lot once they get moved through. So.
Okay, Commissioner, fine. Any additional questions?
another thing that I mentioned earlier as well is that we could, staff could be directed to look at other different ways of funding this with, capital improvement, sales tax, things of that nature. It's just being presented with the 80% special assessments because that was the policy that was adopted with the 2022 CIP.
Additional questions, anyone?
I'll make the motion to create the Improvement District 2280 and approve the engineer's report.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to create an improvement district number 2280 and improvement engineers report for a roundabout at 23rd Avenue East and 6th Street East, as presented by Mr. Hanson, our city engineer. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes on a 3-2 vote.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is an employee participation agreement in the North Dakota Public Employees Retirement System Deferred Compensation Plan. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. So the purpose of this agenda item today is to seek approval from the Commission to sign off on an agreement for us to join the North Dakota PERS 457 plan. This may seem a little bit confusing, and we already offer a 457 plan, but it has come to my attention that we do not actually run it through PERS. We maintain it on a separate basis, and then we report to PERS. Forgive me. So the purpose today is to gain the agreement in order to run it through PERS in order to create efficiencies as well as to prevent any potential errors that could be created by human error of the data entry that must be done in the current process now. To give you a little bit of history, we do have at current 9 different providers that we have to manually, and Heidi can attest to this, we have to manually send checks or ACH amounts to each pay period. By joining the PERS, this would create an efficiency for her office as well as mine by making it so that we send a single ACH that would go to PERS itself, and then they would distribute it accordingly to the 457 plans that are available through them. Now, this does mean that we would be limiting the number of providers for the 457 plan, going from the 9 that we currently have, and the proposal that we're currently looking at is we would drop down to 3. I have numbers to show how many employees we have in each of these funds. Right now, we have 91 employees total that participate in the 457 plan, and most of the 2 larger ones are the ones that we would retain and continue to let them sunset out. The people that are in them would stay in them if they so chose, but we would not allow any new employees to join those 457 plans simply because they are the 2 largest ones. All of the others would become non-available as of January 1st, 2024. We are trying to line it up with the benefits enrollment in order to have people make this switch as of January 1st, 2024. Any questions I can answer?
Any questions for Mrs. Gasovic? Anyone? This is an actionable item.
Well, I guess I do have a question.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
Have you disseminated this information to all of the employees so they know what could take place? If
We have
would've-
not. Right now, we are still kind of in the discovery and setup phase. That's why I said the potential right now is that we would end all but 2. We have one, our largest one that our employees can participate with actually is in PERS. So for a lot of them, they would simply just roll on through the PERS, a few forms, and they're set. Nothing changes for them. It only changes on our side as far as the administration of such plans. The next 2 down, like I said, they have a significant amount of those employees. One of them has 20, and the other one has, I've lost it on my list here, 18. And so we would let them sunset off, given that they do have a large portion. The rest of them have 3, 4, 6, 2. They're not very big in the participation, and so the extra work that we put in each pay period, so 26 times a year, to send off the monies for those is not efficient, really. So employees would have one of 3 plans. When we propose this out to them and roll this out to them, they could leave their money in their current account, open up a new PERS account, and roll it through one of the approved PERS providers, and they would just simply have 2 accounts. That's up to them. They could also choose to leave the money in the account and contribute on their own. Once they get their paycheck, they make the contribution to that 457 plan on their own, and they're able to do that. Or they could take the funds from that current 457 and roll it into one of the plans offered by PERS and just continue on through one of them. So there are options for the people that we would be sunsetting sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Any additional questions, commissioners? This is an actionable item.
I'll make a motion to move it forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the employer participation agreement in the North Dakota Public Employees Retirement System Deferred Compensation Plan as outlined this evening. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is the City Administrator's Report. Call on Dustin Scott, Acting City Administrator.
Good evening, Commissioners. I actually don't have anything for you. I'd like Chief Otterness to come up and give an update on the body-worn cameras. But before he does, do you have any questions for me?
Anything for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Chief?
Good evening, Chief Otterness, and welcome.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. Just a real quick update. We've got a final date from Motorola Solutions, WatchGuard, on a rollout date for our body-worn camera program. All of our equipment is in. It has been inventoried, and their earliest available date to come in and train all of our staff and have a complete rollout will start on October 24th. So that is the earliest our vendor could be here to help us get all the programming done, all the training internally done with our staff, and implement the full rollout. So sometime after October 24th, you should start to see all of our staff wearing body-worn cameras. And that's just a real quick update. I just wanted to update you with the timeline.
Questions to the Chief? Anyone? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Item number 9 is City Administrator, a statement about a meeting that we had today. We had give me a minute, here it is. We had a special meeting this afternoon, or early this morning, excuse me, and where we interviewed candidates. And I have a prepared statement that I'd like to read with regard to that. The City of West Fargo has enlisted the service of Baker Tilly to assist in our city administrator's search. Baker Tilly received a total of 40 applications and carefully reviewed each one, identifying the highly qualified candidates who met the criteria set forth in the recruitment brochure. After a thorough evaluation, the Commission had the opportunity to assess the top 9 applicants and has now selected 3 finalists. In alphabetical order, we are delighted to extend an invitation for in-person interviews to Kelsey Baker, Sean Kessel, and Dustin Scott. These interviews are scheduled to take place on Tuesday, September 26th. The interview schedule is currently in development, and we will share more details in the coming days. Our goal of the Commission is to involve staff and the community in the process to meet and greet the 3 finalists. That's not an actionable item. Commissioners, if you have any additional comments, we all participated in the interviews today.
I think we need to make it action.
It is an actionable item, excuse me. I was schooled up on that and I forgot to write it down. So we do have to have a motion to approve the 3 finalists that we have selected.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to accept the city administrator report as presented this evening that Kelsey Baker, Sean Kessel, and Dustin Scott are the 3 finalists for the city administrator's job in West Fargo. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Let the record show it was a 5-0 vote. Mr. Scott, any correspondence that you need to share with us?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Does any of the commissioners have a non-agenda item they'd like to bring forward this evening? Does any department head have a non-agenda item they'd like to, please, Sarah, come to.
Apologies, Commissioner President and Commissioners. I'm actually bringing you back to the agenda item I had. In a review of my notes, they have, per the ND PERS agency, a very specific statement as to how it is approved for you to sign the document. I'm going to ask, I can't talk. I'm going to ask John to review it for me real quick so that he can insert a citation that I don't know because it has to be very specific. So we don't have to go through the nonprofit part? Perfect. Then never mind, thank you.
Thank you. Does any other department have anything for us? I would ask all department heads that are here with us this evening, when we had the public input, obviously a lot of their comments was about property taxes. And somehow we need to have a better agenda as to outlining to the public when those meetings take place. The public continues to come before us and a little bit not understanding what the process is. So to communications, I know that you put it out there. I know that you do a good job at it, but we need to do more. We need to do more so these people understand that. I wanted to share that today I probably got the most one of the best comments that I'd ever gotten from anybody from the public regarding services that were provided when a taxpayer had a concern last week, and the manner of which that department, which was Public Works, responded to it. It was, I have it on my phone if anybody would like to hear it. It is absolutely amazing, the response. First of all, it took place in the same workday that she had a concern about soil plugging a drain. It was executed that day. She had another concern down the street, and it was executed the next day. And so we continue to provide services to the public, and this is just a shining example of a response by Public Works. So glad to hear it. Anyone else? Anything non-agenda? Commissioner Simmons?
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Wilson?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Sarah?